You've heard it said that at the end of the rainbow there's a pot of gold, right? Well, in this part of the series, it's a bit like that, except that the rainbow, it isn't that colorful. It's rather bleak. But you need to follow it before you can get to the pot of gold. And trust me, when we get there in this series, man, Have you ever in physics class done that little experiment where you have a light beam hit like this prism? On the one side you have this light beam, and on the other side of the prism the light is separated into different colors. Now all this prism does is that it reveals what the light beam consists out of. Now you might not be a Bible believer, but you've probably heard the phrase, the 10 Commandments. And boy, it's got a bad rap out there, and even in most Christian churches too. Because the English translations, like I have it here, they start with those famous words, thou shalt not. And in our day and age, we don't like being told what to do and what not to do. So the common perception of the 10 Commandments is that it's a list of restrictions. But actually the 10 Commandments, the law of God, is like a prism. So just like the light is hitting the prism, so the character of God's love hits the two tables of stone that the commandments were written on, and it reveals what love consists out of, what it looks like in action for you and me. When you think about loving other people, love doesn't lie to them, it doesn't steal from them, it doesn't cheat on them. So 6 of these 10 commandments, they contain everything, all the keys for how to successfully love other people. And the first 4 commandments, they talk about how we love God. We set time apart to be with Him. We don't make Him secondary. So God's law is all about love. Now check out these verses real quick. In Romans 13:10 it says, love is the fulfillment of the law. Galatians 5:14, for all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, you shall love. And Jesus Himself confirms this too as He sums up the law in Matthew 22 verse 37 to 39. Love the Lord your God. Love your neighbor as yourself. So God's law is like a written down version of the principles that make up God's character of love. Now check this out. God's law is written by His own finger upon every nerve, every muscle, every faculty, which is an inborn mental or physical power, which has been entrusted to man. So having God's law written all over us, that's what it's like to be made in God's image. So if you've watched the previous episodes, you know that we've talked about God's glory, God's character, and God's law. And here you can see they're actually all the same thing. And when we break these principles of love, that is what the Bible defines as sin. 1 John 3:4. Sin is the transgression of the law. When we sin and break that law, we don't just break a legal document. We break something in us. It's like a mirror being cracked. Does a broken mirror still reflect an accurate picture of reality? No, it shows a distorted reflection. And that is what sin does. It breaks that reflection of God's character likeness in us. Because whether in action or thought or feeling, we do something contrary to God's character. So instead of manifesting God's character, displaying God's glory, Romans 3:23 tells us, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. We are like broken mirrors. We can no longer reflect God's character anymore as we were supposed to live out the principles of love, because it has got distorted. And it shows a completely different reflection. In a very short and good book that you need to read, it says, man was originally endowed with noble powers and a well-balanced mind. He was perfect in his being and in harmony with God. His thoughts were pure, his aims holy, but through disobedience, his powers were perverted, and selfishness took the place of love. And what place did love have? It was written on every nerve, muscle, and faculty. So now instead of reflecting God's likeness of love, we reflect the likeness of the first one to sin. 1 John 3:8, he who sins is of the devil. And those distorted principles are built on selfishness. I remember my mom told me in my teen years that because of my grandfather's drinking addiction, physiologically I would have a greater risk to get addicted to alcohol as well. It's called epigenetics. It means that genes are being passed along from generation to generation. Good traits, but also the bad traits. And the Bible actually already mentions this all the way in the beginning in Genesis 5:3. And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness, after his image. So Adam got a son in his likeness, his own image, and Adam was made in the image of God. And the plan was that that would have been passed to the next generation and so on. That was the design. But now, instead, selfishness has taken the place of love. So did Adam still pass on God's beautiful image in which he was created? No, because he didn't have it anymore. So what image did he pass on? He passed on that broken, distorted, rebellious, selfish image. And that has been passed on from generation to generation to generation to you and me sitting here today. Great news, huh? Romans 5:12 and 19. Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. For as one man's disobedience, many were made sinners. Psalm 51:5 tells us, surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. So we were already born in selfishness. Why? Because we were conceived by parents with a sinful nature who passed that along to us. And we can see this clearly in our world. All revolves around self, and we get bombarded with messages that uplift self. Make sure you drive a nicer car than your neighbor. Put on this makeup so everyone will look at you. Just think about the self-help book industry. Better yourself with the power from within yourself. You can do it. It's all about me, myself, and I. Selfishness written on our hearts, passed along from generation to generation. Isaiah 53 verse 6 says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. And this is what we have been doing, every single one of us. From the moment you were born, you were naturally drawn to self. And here's why that is such a bad deal for us. This mindset, it places you in a position that really is destructive to yourself and to others. It's like ignoring all the warnings on a product of how not to use it because you want to do what you want. Who are they to tell me I cannot use rat poison as toothpaste or a microwave to warm up my pet? And that is the attitude that we naturally have towards God, the one who designed us and knows how we individually and as a collective function best. Philippians 2:21 says, for all seek their own, not the things which are of Christ Jesus. Another Bible author puts it this way in Romans 8:7, because the carnal mind, that is our selfish, sinful attitude, is enmity against God. For it is not subject to the law of God, nor indeed can be. So it's an enemy of God. It's not just that it doesn't want to follow God's law or be like him in character, but it cannot even. Why? Because we're selfish. And God's law is all about selfless love. And a selfish heart cannot selflessly love. A selfish heart hates a selfless God. Who is God to say that I shouldn't lie? If I just tell this little lie, I get a raise and more money, so I think I'll be happier. Who is God to say that I should take care of my body like a temple? I've been smoking for years and I love it and I'm not gonna stop. Who is God to say that I should be humble and take the first step to apologize? They did wrong. They should make the first move. So we completely disregard God's instructions on how we function best, and we end up using other people for sex to satisfy our own pleasure rather than to build strong family relationships that are based on love. We rather eat junk food than healthy food, rather take medication than make lifestyle changes. And here's the thing, and see if you can find yourself in this person's reflections. In Romans 7 verse 18 and 19, for I know that in me, that is in my flesh, nothing good dwells. For to will is present with me, but how to perform what is good, I do not find. For the good that I will to do, I do not do. But the evil I will not to do, that I practice. In other words, we know we shouldn't do it, but we do it anyway. Or we know we should do this, but we don't. And even when we try to do better, we fail more often than we succeed. There's a reason for why New Year's resolutions often already die off in the same month of January. It's an unpopular conclusion, but we all know it's true. We lack the power to change. And those are just the things that we might be willing to change, that we are aware of. Let alone all the things we're aware of that we don't want to change, or even the things that we are not aware of are bad. But I know it's highly uncomfortable to think about this, so we make up excuses or try to cover up. I know I'm not really a good person, but I give so much money to charity, so that kind of balances it out. I know I shouldn't drink alcohol, it's not really good for me, but at least I'm not doing drugs. So just like Adam and Eve, they sewed fig leaves together to try to cover their nakedness, trying to hide how far they have fallen, making themselves as presentable as possible. But the second Adam stood face to face with God, despite wearing his fancy fig leaf clothes, he instantly acknowledged that he was naked. You know, our best efforts are not even worth mentioning in the face of perfection, of the high standards that we have fallen from. Because also we know that it's not just about our outward actions on the appearance, it's about the heart. Proverbs 23:7 says, "For as he thinks in his heart, so is he." And are our outward actions always an accurate reflection of our heart? You do something nice on the outside, looks good, looks genuine, but is it really genuine, or do you secretly hope for recognition and praise for what you do? You don't steal, is that because in your heart you just hate the idea of taking something that is not yours, even if it's from the super rich or big companies? Or is it because you don't want to risk going to jail? You don't cheat on your partner. Is that because your heart is solely set on him or her? Or is it because you're afraid of the potential negative consequences of acting on the lusts that are happening in your heart? Do you see what sin has done? If you think that sin is just by action violating God's law, you'll only seek forgiveness, if anything, for those actions. But it's not just about the actions, friends. It's about that selfish, rebellious heart. Yes, Jesus wants to forgive you for those actions, but he doesn't want to just deal with the fruits. He wants to deal with the roots. I know that we've been covering a lot of bad news in these last two videos, but friends, you gotta understand that there's a problem first before you would seek a solution. And the good news is, there is a solution. I want to end with these astonishing words, pregnant with hope. I love this. Check it out. To the angels there seems to be no way of escape for the transgressor. They ceased their songs of praise, and throughout the heavenly courts there was mourning for all the ruin sin had wrought, out of harmony with the nature of God, unyielding to the claims of his law. Naught but destruction was before the human race. Since the divine law is as changeless as the character of God, there could be no hope for man. Unless some way could be devised, whereby his transgression might be pardoned, his nature renewed, and his spirit restored to reflect the image of God. And now here it comes, the punchline. Divine love had conceived such a plan. Wow! Don't miss the next videos. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that it's been helpful to you, and if you got any value out of the video, then please consider liking it, leaving a comment, subscribing, and most importantly, sharing it with your friends.